My name is Nora, and 3 weeks ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to a message that changed everything. I was in a tiny Tokyo apartment, halfway through a 3-month design residency, with cherry blossoms just beginning to bloom outside my window. At 2:46 a.m., my phone lit up with a photo that felt like a slap. There they were, Evan and Blair, my ex-husband and the woman he swore he'd never touched while we were still married. They were standing in front of my house. My house. Middle fingers raised. Grinning, like they'd won a prize. I stared at the image. And for a second, I thought it had to be fake. Some twisted joke. But the timestamp matched. They'd taken that photo 2 hours ago. Middle of the night back home. They wanted me to see it when I couldn't sleep. When I was half a world away and helpless, I called my cousin Danielle immediately. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was shaking. "You saw it?" "Right," I told her I did. She told me the locks had been changed the day before. That Blair posted on Facebook about reclaiming the space and turning it into a real home. I sat up in bed, cold and shaking, trying to understand how they even got in. She said something about squatters' rights. About how I'd abandoned the house by being out of the country for too long. That house wasn't abandoned. That house was my home. It was the only part of the divorce I fought for. I didn't want the car. I didn't want a limone. I wanted the house because it was mine, long before Evan came along. It was where I grew up. Where I spent every Thanksgiving burning pies with my mom. Where my dad taught me how to change a tire. How to do my taxes. How to rebuild a sink. The house was the last piece of my parents I had left. And now, Evan was standing in front of it like it belonged to him. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that being overseas made it harder for me to act. He knew I'd be blindsided. And Blair, always the eager little parasite, was right there with him, twisting the knife. I felt sick. I felt violated. I felt like screaming, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen until my vision blurred and my teeth started to ache from clenching my jaw too hard. This wasn't about property. This was personal. And I knew then that if I didn't do something, they'd win. Not just the house. Everything. My memories. My dignity. The story of my life. They'd rewrite it with their names on every page. Laughing in the margins. No. Not this time. That night, something inside me snapped and reshaped itself. Not into rage. Not into panic. But into something colder. Cleaner. Strategic. I wasn't going to fly home and bang on the door like a woman unhinged. I wasn't going to beg for what was already mine. I was going to plan. I was going to be deliberate. I was going to make them regret underestimating me. And that's how my war began. Not with fire. Not with fury. But with the stillness of a woman who finally remembered who the hell she was. Most people don't understand why I fought so hard for the house. On paper, it didn't look like much. A 2-bedroom craftsman in an aging neighborhood with squeaky floorboards and a roof that needed replacing, but it was never just a house. It was the place my dad built bookshelves by hand, where my mom played Fleetwood Mac on Sunday mornings while making pancakes. It was where we sat on the porch during summer thunderstorms and talked about things that mattered. When my parents died within 9 months of each other, the house became my anchor. I used to walk through it at night just to feel them still there. The soft dent in the hallway rug where Mom always paused with her coffee. The sticky drawer in the kitchen, Dad never fixed because he said it had personality. Those imperfections became sacred. The place breathed their memory. It was the only part of my past I could still hold in my hands. Then came Evan. He was charming at first. That's how those kinds always are. He said the house was cute. That it had character. I should have known that was code for easy to manipulate. We got married too fast. I was still grieving. He filled a silence I didn't want to sit with. But I didn't see the truth until it was too late. Until I caught him and Blair outside a motel, with their lies unraveling faster than his button-down shirt. When we divorced, He fought dirty. Said I was unstable. That I didn't know what I wanted. That I was too obsessed with the past. Maybe he was right about one thing. I did want the past. I wanted to keep the only piece of it that hadn't betrayed me. So I let him keep his pension. His stupid motorcycle. His freedom. I kept the house. And I made it mine again. I refinished the cabinets with my bare hands. I stripped wallpaper until my fingers bled. I planted roses in the front yard. Just like Mom did. I worked late nights. Skipped vacations. Paid every bill myself. That house became my statement. My survival. My rebuilt self. Which is why seeing Blair in the doorway wearing one of my old sweatshirts, drinking coffee from my mom's favorite mug felt like a punch to the throat. She had no history there. No right. She didn't know the years it took to unbury myself from Evan's lies, or the money I scraped together to pay off Dad's second mortgage after he died. She hadn't lived the weight of that place. She was just squatting in someone else's soul. I don't care what the law says about timelines and keys and paper loopholes. That house was never theirs. And it never would be. Not as long as I still had a breath in my body and fire in my spine. They thought I was the kind of woman who would fold. Who would cry from Tokyo and come home begging. But they forgot something. They forgot what that house meant to me. And they forgot what kind of woman it raised. Not soft. Not silent. A storm. Quiet at first. But inevitable. A few days after the photo, Blair sent a video. It landed in my inbox with a cheery subject line, New Beginnings. I opened it on autopilot. Still groggy from a full night drafting floor plans. For the first few seconds, it was just shaky footage of the living room. Then Blair's face filled the screen. She had that smug smile she always wore like perfume. Hey Nora. Just redecorating. Hope you don't mind. She turned the camera to Evan, who was laughing as he tore down the vintage wallpaper my mom had chosen. The same wallpaper I'd steamed, pressed, and resealed by hand last winter. The paper fluttered to the ground like tissue. Blair giggled and said it had to go. Said it looked like a sad museum. Said it was time the house had some real taste. I closed the laptop. My jaw locked so tight, it hurt. My whole body felt still. Like I was watching myself from across the room. They weren't just invading my house. They were erasing it. I texted Lisa. I didn't even bother with punctuation. They're gutting the place. Her reply came fast. Don't react. That's exactly what they want. She was right. Blair wanted a meltdown. A screaming match. A court battle I'd lose on a technicality. I could see her already rehearsing her. We just wanted peace face for the judge. So, I swallowed the scream rising in my throat and wrote back, I'm done crying. Her response. Good. Now let's get smart. I took a walk through the park near my flat. Sakura petals drifted through the air like confetti. Everything looked peaceful. Balanced. It made the rage in my chest feel heavier. Because this wasn't peaceful. This was war. They didn't see it yet. But the moment they tore down that wallpaper, they stopped playing house. They started something else. Something I was no longer afraid to finish. The turning point came from an unexpected detail. Blair had posted a wedding throwback on Instagram. Just a filtered photo of her and Evan in front of the courthouse steps. Beaming like winners. I almost kept scrolling. But something about the image made me pause. Evan was holding a folder. Tucked inside was a document. It wasn't the paper itself that caught my attention. It was the header. I zoomed in. The seal looked wrong. Not just aesthetically. Technically. I'd worked enough property development cases to know what official paperwork was supposed to look like. And this seal didn't match our county courthouse at all. At first, I thought maybe it was from a different jurisdiction. Or maybe I was grasping at straws. But then I pulled up a PDF of my own deed. Signed after the divorce. The difference was clear. The spacing. The seal. The document number format, it was all wrong in Evan's version. My stomach flipped. If that was the paperwork they'd used to change the locks, Then something bigger was at play. I sent a screenshot to Lisa. She called me less than 2 minutes later. Nora, this might be forged. That was the moment the plan began to form. Not out of emotion. Out of precision. They were sloppy, arrogant, reckless, and now, finally, vulnerable. And I was ready. The demolition idea came to me while staring at a construction site near my Tokyo apartment. It was nothing special. Just an old ramen shop getting torn down to make room for a new parking garage. But as I stood there, watching the walls crumble, something clicked. I didn't want to fight Evan and Blair for the house anymore. I didn't want to reclaim it or scrub their fingerprints off the windows. I wanted to end it. Level it. Bury everything they touched under concrete and noise. I pulled out my phone and started researching demolition companies in my hometown. Within an hour, I had 3 quotes. The next morning, I called Hazel Raymond, owner of a mid-sized demo firm with a reputation for speed and discretion. I didn't tell her everything. Just enough. I had a house I needed to offload fast. I was willing to take a financial hit if she could make it happen in days. Not weeks. She didn't ask why. Just said, "Bring the deed and your ID. And be serious." I landed in L.A. 2 days later. Jet-lagged, furious, and ready. Hazel met me at her office. Clipboard in hand. "You really want this place gone?" she asked. Skimming the address. "Most sellers want the property cleared. Not the memories." I smiled. "I want both gone." She studied me for a second longer than necessary. "And the current occupants, they'll be gone. One way or another." We signed everything that afternoon. I sold the house for less than it was worth. I didn't care. The money wasn't the point. Power was. Clarity was. The idea that Evan and Blair would wake up one morning to the sound of jackhammers tearing through the floor they slept on, that was priceless. Hazel scheduled the teardown for Friday. I gave Evan 72 hours notice. Delivered through our lawyer. If they were still inside when the crew showed up, they'd be trespassing on private property. I didn't expect them to take it seriously. I was counting on it. Because nothing screams karma louder than a bulldozer. Once the demolition was in motion, I turned my focus to the paper trail. I looped in my friend Will, a real estate attorney who owed me a favor from an old zoning project. He confirmed what I'd suspected. The document Evan used to change the locks wasn't just unofficial. It was fake. Badly faked. Wrong seal. Wrong format. Wrong county. Amateur hour. But that wasn't the part that stunned me. Will ran a background check out of curiosity. And found that Evan used to work for the same bank that held my parents' second mortgage. He left the bank shortly after their foreclosure filing. A filing I hadn't known about. Because my parents never told me they were in trouble. That's when it hit me. Evan had access to their records, their debt, their vulnerability. He'd known about the house's financial strain long before I did. And he used it. He watched me grieve. Watched me fight for the house in court. Watched me pour everything I had into fixing it. And he never said a word. Will forwarded me bank statements showing irregular transactions during that time. And a few shell accounts with Evan's name on them. Nothing outright illegal. But enough to raise questions. Enough to pressure. Enough to corner. I emailed Lisa with the subject line "leverage secured." Because now this wasn't just a stolen house or a fake deed. It was a pattern. A plan. And I had the receipts. Friday morning. I parked a block away from the house. The demolition crew was already setting up bright orange vests. Roaring machines. Caution tape. Hazel stood near the sidewalk holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She gave me a nod. I nodded back. Across the street. Neighbors gathered in small clusters. Some were already filming. Evan's car wasn't in the driveway. But Blair's was. Hazel made the first move. She walked up the steps and rang the bell. Blair opened the door in pajamas. "Mascara smudged." hair pulled up like she hadn't slept. Her eyes widened when she saw the crew behind Hazel. "What the hell is this?" Hazel flipped a paper from her clipboard. "Notice of demolition. Property sold. All legal. All final. You can't do this." Blair's voice cracked. Hazel didn't flinch. "If you're still inside at 8:01, it's trespassing. You've got 20 minutes. Blair slammed the door. I stayed on the sidewalk. I didn't need to go closer. Not yet. I wanted them to see me when it happened. Then Evan's car turned the corner. He parked fast and stormed out, looking furious. He didn't see me right away. He made a beeline for Hazel. "You don't have authority to do this." Hazel pointed at the contract. "Actually, I do." He turned, eyes scanning. And then he saw me. His face twisted. "You did this." I didn't answer. Just stood still. Hands in my coat pockets. The police cruiser arrived next. Standard procedure for public demolitions. The same officer from the day we confronted them weeks ago stepped out. Recognized me. Nodded once. Blair ran outside then, phone in hand. Yelling something about rights and lawsuits and harassment. The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, you've been notified. You are now occupying private property illegally." Neighbors kept filming. I saw phones pointed in every direction. And that was the moment I stepped forward. I told the officer I had proof of document forgery. I told Evan I had the bank statements. I told Blair that every word she posted online was being archived. And when Evan tried to shout over me, I raised my voice just enough for the phones to catch it. "You forged documents. You lied to the court. You stole my home. And now you're going to watch it fall." Evan lunged toward me. But the officer stepped between us. Blair was crying now. Loud and messy. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Just give it up already." And then Hazel raised her arm. "Time's up." The first crash sounded like thunder. The bulldozer's blade punched through the living room wall. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Blair screamed and covered her mouth. Evan just stood frozen, as if he couldn't believe this was real. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched. Neighbors cheered. Some gasped. One man muttered, "Or Dom. She really did it." I turned away from the house and looked at Evan. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. "You destroyed everything," he said. "No. I cleared away the wreckage you left behind." Blair fell to her knees on the lawn. She clutched something in her hands. Maybe a photo. Maybe nothing. She looked up at me with eyes that finally understood. This wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. Evan didn't speak again. The officer pulled him aside. Blair sobbed into the grass. The house crumbled behind them. Every board. Every beam. Every trace of what once was. Gone. And in its place? Silence. The kind that only comes after a storm? The day after the demolition, I felt hollow. Like a part of me had been erased along with the walls. But then Sam, my sister, showed up at my apartment with a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. She held a sketchbook filled with drawings of gardens, benches, to murals, ideas to turn the empty lot into something new. A place for the neighborhood to gather, to heal, to remember. Sam's anger at me for leaving faded as we talked through the designs. She'd blamed me for disappearing when Mom and Dad were dying, for chasing my career instead of staying home. But now she was ready to build something together. Something that belonged to both of us. We worked side by side over the next few months, planting rose bushes in the spots Mom used to tend, painting walls with colors she loved, turning the space into a community art park, a place where the past met the future. One afternoon, while watering the new blooms, I realized the anger that had driven me was starting to lift. The ashes of revenge were giving way to something softer, stronger. Forgiveness, not for them, but for myself, for the years lost, for the chance to begin again. This garden wasn't just a tribute to Mom and Dad. It was a symbol of rebirth, of family, of the truth that even after destruction, growth is always possible. Months later, I stood at the edge of the finished park. The scent of roses mingled with fresh paint and sunshine. Sam squeezed my hand and smiled. We named the place Rose and Brick, a nod to our mother's favorite flower and the foundation our father laid. It wasn't home, but it was something better, a beginning. I moved into a new apartment nearby, with large windows overlooking the park, no longer haunted by walls filled with betrayal, but surrounded by life and color. One evening, I found a letter Mom had written years ago tucked inside an old book. She said, "Home isn't where you live. It's where you find the courage to begin again." I read that line over and over, because after everything, that was the truth I needed to hold on to. Revenge had cleared the ground. Now it was time to plant something new, something real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace, because I was finally free. And this time, the story was mine.